What's up guys, I'm Nico from Camera Crunch, and in today's video I'm going to be doing a review on the Voigtlander Bessa R2A and sort of my experiences shooting with this camera and how I use it. But before we get to that review, I'm going to set that down here. I just want to make a small announcement, and that is going to be every Friday from now on I'm going to be doing a film photography related video. So that could either be a gear review like this film camera. I'm going to be reviewing this scanner in the upcoming weeks. It could be a tutorial, it could be something about history or about a film photographer. Whatever it may be, every Friday is going to be about film. So if you're into film, look forward to that. And if you're not, you can just skip every Friday because that's going to be all about film. The digital stuff is going to be scattered throughout the week, every day except for Friday. And yeah, I just wanted a little bit of more consistency in the channel, so I wanted to have a series that could be ongoing and something that I could stick to. So Friday is going to be all about film. Film is something that I love doing, so hopefully it goes well. The Voigtlander Bessa R2A is one of Voigtlander's many rangefinder cameras, and the rangefinder camera is different from your standard SLR camera because it's not a TTL system. You actually look through a viewfinder and focus using the rangefinder system, which might be foreign to a lot of you, but you basically, the way it looks inside the viewfinder is you line up two patches. You line up a patch with the actual image, and when it's lined up, then that means your image is in focus. And I'm going to have a video on rangefinders and what they are on another day, maybe next Friday when I do another Film Friday video. But basically that's how it works. And I can't say which is better, a rangefinder or an SLR. They're just different, and that's one of the reasons why you want to get a Voigtlander Bessa camera. Now, the Voigtlander Bessa R2A is one of the 6 cameras, 6 or 7 actually, that take M-mount cameras in terms of the Voigtlander Bessa family, and the A in the name designates auto exposure. Now, the R2A is different from the R3A and the R4A because of its frame lines. The R2A has a 0.7 magnification viewfinder, which makes it good for 35, 50, 75, and 90 millimeter lenses. The R3A has a 1:1 magnification viewfinder, which makes it good for 40 millimeters and above. And then the R4A is good for wider lenses. So that's around 21 mil to 50 mil. You have those frame lines on the R4A. So now that I've talked a little bit about the Bessa and how it compares to its different siblings, the R3A and the R4A, as well as the M variants of the cameras, I want to talk a little bit about the Bessa in comparison to the Leica cameras that I've owned. I've owned the M3, the M4P, and the M4II in the past, the M3 being the best built out of the bunch. And I have to say that while the Bessa isn't on par in terms of build quality and material, it's built very well. And if you haven't played with one, if you just look at pictures on the internet, it looks a little bit deceiving because when you look at it on the internet, it seems a little bit like a toy, a little bit hollow, but it's actually really hefty. Now, you'll get bits of the camera that are built with plastic, like the knobs and the levers and the back door and such, but the main components of the camera are built or at least supported with metal, like the top plate and parts of the bottom plate, they're built with metal. I also have this additional grip down here, which is also built very well. So while you're not getting a Leica when you get a Bessa, you are getting a very, very good camera. And if you're concerned about just using a rangefinder and having a nice tool to work with, then a Bessa is a nice starting point. Now, if you really want a Leica, you can probably get a Leica M3 or an M2 for the price of a brand new Bessa if you look in the used market. So if you really, really want a Leica, then you should really just go for the Leica, just so that you won't be disappointed. But the Bessa is a nice option. And out of all of the rangefinders that I've owned in the past, and this is the only one that I currently owned, and I think that says something. Now, while this camera is very good, especially for the price, it's not perfect. Like I said earlier, the viewfinder patch isn't always the clearest. And one of my biggest gripes about this camera is the rubber grips that is around the camera. Now, the rubber grips actually feel really good. But this camera in particular has a problem with the rubber expanding. And it expanded pretty quickly with my camera. And in fact, as you can see here, the back doesn't have the rubber on anymore. Now, it didn't completely come off with just naturally coming off. I actually took it off, but that's because one side came off. And I've actually ordered leather from camera leather to cover it up, and I'm just going to see how it looks. So now that you've seen the camera and sort of what it does, a basic understanding of what it does, I want to share how I use the camera, because this has some features like I mentioned earlier, like auto exposure, which really helps me out when I'm using this camera. So I'm cleaning the viewfinder. So this camera is a nice camera because of the auto exposure, and I have to be honest, I use auto exposure a lot. Some of the purists might not, like using auto exposure, but this camera has auto exposure for a reason. So here I have my 35mm Summicron. That's an f2 lens. And I typically shoot wide open if I'm shooting people, up close, maybe a portrait or something like that. But if I'm shooting a street scene where I want more depth of field, then I'll, shoot anywhere from f5.6, f8, f11, maybe even f16, but I rarely go to f16. So yeah, 5.6 to f11 is where I'm at. Because I'm choosing the aperture, and because the film speed stays constant, I can then use aperture priority to determine my shutter speed. So typically what I do is I keep my aperture priority at just the center settings. But because I'm shooting film, film has more latitude in the highlights. So highlights are easier to not only restore, but you just get more detail there in general. But you typically lose the shadows if you don't expose correctly. So if you underexpose, you'll quickly lose the shadows. And then if you want to then sort of increase the exposure because the image is a little bit too dark, or you want to do something with the highlights, then you'll get really muddy shadows. So what I'll typically do is, right now I'm shooting Tri-X 400. So instead of shooting 400, instead of setting my ISO to 400, which you can do over here, I'll typically set that to, you can do it in third of a stop increments. So you can do 400 and 1/3, you can do 400 and 2/3, or you can go 800. I'll usually do 2/3, so that will increase the exposure or overexpose by 2/3 of a stop, and that usually gives me very nice exposure values. So that's what I do when I'm shooting with this. Again, I usually shoot in aperture priority mode. And yeah, so that's it for the review. I hope you guys liked it. If you did and you want more, make sure to look forward to every Friday where I'll have another film photography related video. If you want me to talk about this camera in a different way, or there's something else you want to know, definitely leave those in the comment box down below. I also want your suggestions on what the next video should be for next Friday and the Fridays to come up. So leave those also in the description box, not in the description box, the comment box down below. And I'll see you guys next time.